I believe jiu-jitsu is super pure and puts people in positions where
is what did you say?
It's pure, like no.
Oh, pure. Yeah.
Like there's no lying in jiu-jitsu. Like I'm gonna be able to tell the truth with you, and you have to tell me the truth back. So you've been a couple lessons in jiu-jitsu now with you. I wanted to know, like, I know you, but now I'm really gonna know you. And even the Joker, I guess, says in like these Batman series, right? Like, yeah, but do you really know somebody? In a sense, I know your friends better than you know them. Do you want to know which ones were?
Yeah, dude.
You know what scene I'm talking about in Batman, right?
The Joker's my favorite. I mean, the Heath Ledger Joker's the best.
So, and I feel like I love that character. I relate to that character. I would want to play that character because I feel like I'm doing what he's doing in a sense, right?
Minus
at least the Heath Ledger version, right? Is he's wanting to know the truth, and he's essentially saying when people are on the verge of death, or in my case on the verge of injury, that's when you know who people really are.
Or when they're really uncomfortable. I mean, no, I know for me, I wasn't on the verge of injury or training with you the first couple times, but it was really apparent to me that I was faced with there's no hiding how I feel about things, And I mean, the first couple times we trained, the first time we trained, it was just so, because, okay, so here's the backstory. A bunch of my buddies that I work with went and trained jiu-jitsu last year. Okay. And they wanted me to go, right? And I'm like, nah, dude. I was like, I'm not good. My workouts are pretty tough, Yeah. And I was like, so I just kept making excuses, basically. But then when we connected again, this kind of came up to where I was like, Rich, I need something to push me right now, man, because I work with, performance coaches like mentally, and I try to do that, but like there's something really missing for myself. And I know you train high level athletes. You're literally a coach for UFC coaches right now. And I kind of like connected those dots. I was like, maybe I could pay Rich to coach me. And I was like, I don't even know what this looks like, but like, let's just start with, we'll just get on a call every week, and I talk for an hour, okay? I don't even know what this is going to turn into, but I I feel like I don't want to, and there's a long journey here, obviously, but this is how this happened, right? Because then, and then you're like, listen, Hayden, you need to do jiu-jitsu. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So then I come back to Utah traveling, living in Atlanta, came back through and stayed at your house for a few nights while I was in meetings, and then we trained pretty much a couple times. And the first time training with you was just so interesting because, I was just faced with and I remember after you're like, I was like, what'd you notice about me, Rich? And you're like, you really don't like being uncomfortable, like really don't like being uncomfortable. And then you said you're almost too honest with yourself. I don't know what you meant by, I do know what you meant by that, but you said you're almost too honest with yourself, meaning you're like tapping out way too early. You have way more to give than what you're giving. And I was just like, gosh, dude, Rich, just like, my whole life just flashed before my eyes with that 10 minutes of training, Yeah. But that's what was crazy is I was like actually faced with who I was. There's no hiding it, right? Yep. And that's what's been fascinating for me, and at just the very beginning of a jiu-jitsu journey is like, that's why I can't stop thinking about it. It's not because I want to go be a pro whatever, right, or a black belt or anything like that. It's because like I need to know who I really am so that I can change to be who I really want to be. And I can't do that unless I know who I really am. But because I'm like, it's so easy to put on a facade and make people think you're something, right? Right.
Or to convince yourself.
Or even worse. Geez, that's even big, right? Or to convince yourself, even worse. Yeah. But there's no hiding it in jiu-jitsu, and that's that's how I've felt. But like, what have you noticed since I've been?
I've noticed a ton. One thing I notice in you that I really like is like, I really like the quote that says like, you can't give what you don't possess. Right? Like you can't help somebody do something if you don't actually possess it. Right? Like we see, and it could be financially as well, right? Well, like if I want to help people financially, if I don't actually have it, I can't help them, right? It doesn't do me any good. And I think the same philosophy applies in whether it's with knowledge or whether it's with motivation or whether it's with different perspective in life. You can't give what you don't possess. So if you don't possess those qualities, you can't help somebody. So I think when I see you, especially even now, you're recognizing like, oh, this is who I am in a moment of adversity.
Sure.
And this is how I handled it. Oh, and this is how I want to handle it. Okay, now I see you thinking, this is how I'm going to get that.
Yeah.
So you're starting to do that. You're starting to think about, okay, so then you're starting to apply those to your character. Does that make sense?
For sure.
And you recognize that it's one thing to do it on the mat, but the mat is what you do in true adversity, right? Like
it's like what you revert to. It's like you always say, I'm not fighting you, I'm fighting your subconscious. Is that what you say?
Absolutely.
That's the quote, right?
Yeah.
Which is so true, because and what comes out when the most adverse times, it's who you really are. You're the you that you can't manipulate
and you get to see that, right? And Inky Johnson says, adversity introduces you to who you really are.
Yeah.
Right? And you know what? There's more to that I think that's really important. I think most people, a lot of times people get there, and they'll get there in jiu-jitsu, or they'll get there knocking doors, or they'll get there selling life insurance, and I think something happens. I think what you see is a lot of people don't like who they are. And what I use jiu-jitsu for is to show you who you are, but not to make you not like yourself, show you that we can build you up from there.
So that's been the kicker for me that's been so interesting with training with you, has been like, you take it to the next step. Because I mean, one could say, hey, I just want to find out who you are so I can beat you. That's like maybe level 1, right?
Right.
Or that's maybe level 10, I don't know. But because most people don't even think that.
Right.
But with you, you've taken it to another level of like serving other people, where you're like, I want to know what your weaknesses are so that I can show you, so that you can become something better. Because if you don't like yourself, then what are you going to do? Stay the same? Or like just lie to yourself more? You know?
Yes.
No, it's about getting better.
Yes, or you don't like the way you reacted when somebody told you no, because in jiu-jitsu we're telling you no. Jiu-jitsu, I'm telling you I'm better than you.
Dude.
And I want to know, how do you respond?
Yeah.
And then when I see how you respond, we say, hey, this is how we responded, and this is how do you want to respond in that?
That's the other thing that you told me too, that was actually maybe the most impactful thing, was like, you said, when you know you're going to lose, you don't try very hard. I was like, oh, dude, right. It was just like this knife in my heart. I was like, but how do I mean, it was so true that I was like, yeah, you're right. But I also hate that. So, but just when you accept it and there's no getting around it, you're like, you know that's true.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, that's true. So then it became this game of like, okay, you're a third-degree black belt. I'm nobody. Then what do you do? So if I'm going to go roll with you, what am I supposed to do? Just not do it, right? No.
Yes.
So there's been this really interesting like humility aspect where like, I mean, how many thousands of times did you tap when you were learning how to become? I mean, hundreds of thousands of times,
absolutely,
maybe.
Yeah.
And but that humility of saying like, no, there's no perfectionism here. There's just learning, and part of learning is actually submitting.
Yes.
Submitting, and then facing who you are, then submitting again, and then trying again, and then facing who you are, submitting again, trying again.
Yes.
And that's dude, that's so powerful.
Right.
You know, it's like really powerful.
And then you have to ask yourself the question, and perhaps you can answer this, of even in that moment of saying, Hayden, when you know you're not going to win, you're out. So then you have to answer the question of, one, because the first thing I think comes up and probably came up in your mind is, were you like, yeah, but that's a choice.
We talked about this the other night.
Right? You're like, oh, well, maybe. Yeah, I guess that is a choice, and why would I try if I knew I was going to lose?
Huh.